everyone, and welcome back again to the 80s Movie Den. For this episode, we're going to go back to the 1980s most influential athletes for me. And we're going to go into the world of professional soccer. And we're going to talk about a soccer player named Diego Maradona. Diego Maradona was the most dominant soccer player of the 1980s by far. He came onto the scene around 1981-82. And by 1986, at the World Cup in Mexico at the age of 26, he led Argentina to their second World Cup championship. And he did things in that tournament that seemed unfathomable at the time. Diego Maradona was born October 30th, 1960. Unfortunately, he passed away in November of 2020 at the age of 60. He's widely regarded in Argentina as, he's a cultural icon, almost to godlike status. His funeral was attended by tens of thousands of people. I think it was because he came from very humble beginnings. He came from a very poor background. A lot of Argentinians could relate to Diego Maradona. Like I said, by 1986 at the World Cup in Mexico, he was at his absolute prime. And nobody dominated a World Cup the way Diego Maradona dominated the 1986 World Cup at the time. He scored 5 goals, but it was his play on the field that was incomparable. He was a small guy. He was 5 feet 5 inches tall. He was quite short, but it did play to his advantage because he had a very low center of gravity. He was stocky, he was quick, and he had a tremendous amount of balance and power. He was very difficult to knock off the ball. He had an incredible level of ball control, his passing ability, his free kicks, some of his solo efforts. He scored a goal in that tournament that was he coined it himself as the hand of God. Those that have heard of that goal will know exactly what I'm talking about. It was against England. He jumped up to supposedly head the ball over the keeper from England, Peter Shilton. But because of his size, his height, even though he leapt quite high, he couldn't quite reach the ball with his head. So he decided to put his arm up and punch the ball in with his fist. Now, in the world of VAR that exists today, that hand of God story wouldn't have happened. But back then, there was no instant replay. Everything was done in real time, and the goal stood. And you'll see, if you watch footage of the goal, even on YouTube, Maradona will be walking down the sideline, and he puts his left arm in the air, and he holds it up to the crowd as if he's cheering. But that's actually the hand that he used to punch the ball in the net. He was quite the character. So obviously the English would, call him a cheater for scoring a goal like that. I mean, technically he was, but he took advantage of the time and of the time period, and it worked for him. But then 5 minutes later, he scored what is known as the goal of the century. He took the ball at midfield, made a beautiful play by pulling the ball back with his cleat, and then he marched down the field. He went 60 yards. He dribbled around 4 or 5 players, including the goalie, Peter Shilton, and scored what still is regarded to this day the greatest World Cup goal ever. So he made up for it. And I mean, if you tried to write the script, you couldn't write a better script. He made up for that very controversial goal by scoring the greatest goal ever. And yeah, it's still regarded as the greatest goal in World Cup history. And you know, every once in a while I will go back and watch it because it's an absolutely incredible goal. And that's where Diego Maradona etched his place in the history of professional soccer in that tournament. He went on to sign with the Italian Serie A team, Napoli, and won 2 domestic league titles with them. And those were the first 2 titles that Napoli won, and he helped them win. By 1990 at the World Cup in Italy, he had reached his peak. He had a decent tournament, but nothing like 1986. Nobody was really expecting him to repeat 1986. I mean, that performance in Mexico was otherworldly. 1990 was decent. He was still able to lead Argentina to the final in a rematch against then West Germany, who they defeated in 1986. Unfortunately, they fell to West Germany 1-0 on a controversial penalty call. Nonetheless, that was pretty much the beginning of the end for Diego Maradona. Off the field, he led a tumultuous life and a tumultuous lifestyle, partying, hard drugs. I believe that his career would have lasted much longer, and I think he would have done more to cement his legacy if maybe he came up in this time period. He did try to come back in 1994. He had trained really hard, he'd lost a bunch of weight, and he did perform in the 1994 World Cup in the USA. He scored a beautiful goal against Greece. Absolutely beautiful goal. Unfortunately, he tested positive for a banned substance and he was sent home. And that's how his 1994 World Cup ended. He could never quite recover after 1990. And that was pretty much his career. He dabbled a little bit. He played for some teams here and there in Argentina, but his career pretty much came to an end. So he dominated the world of pro soccer, I'd say, from 1982 to 1990. So in about 8 years, he did a tremendous amount of work to cement his legacy as one of the greatest players of all time. Unfortunately, longevity-wise, he didn't last very long. And that's why it's hard for myself to regard him as the greatest ever. As far as the greatest raw talent and his ability to be connected to that soccer ball, I think he's the most naturally gifted player to ever play the game. But in a world now where you have people like Leo Messi, Ronaldo from Portugal, who are coming up on 2 decades. Leo Messi's been playing for almost 20 years and dominating. So it's hard for me not to think of Leo Messi as the greatest of all time. People will say Maradona, people will say Pele, but it's hard because Maradona's career didn't last very long. But what he did in that 8-year period, 10-year period was just unbelievable. It was superhuman-like. So anyways, that's why I've decided to put Diego Maradona in my top 10 most influential athletes of the 1980s, because of not only his play on the field, which was purely dominance, but his life outside of the field, which was also pretty wild and chaotic. And even for non-soccer fans, because back in the 80s, in North America especially, soccer was not nearly as popular as it is now in North America. And it's still not that popular compared to the other sports. But it's easier to get games It's easier to watch European soccer now than it was back in the 80s. It was more difficult unless you had one of those big satellite dishes. They didn't really broadcast weekly games of domestic leagues in Europe back in the 80s. They would do World Cup and stuff like that, but that was it. And he was still very well known despite that, even on this side of the pond. So definitely ranks in the top 10 of the most influential athletes of the 1980s, and of course of all time. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed some of the visuals that I provided. And I would highly recommend going on YouTube. There's a lot of channels out there that will highlight a lot of the goals that he scored and a lot of his greatest moments on the soccer field, and you won't be disappointed. Absolute magic. Anyways, this has been the 80s Movie Den, and as always, we'll catch you on the next one.